On.
I hope the question 1 is well understood. If you have any difficulties, you can contact me later for further explanations. Now, I want us to quickly go to question 2. We have another question with a setup that is still under separation of mixtures. The first one was the setup for distillation process. We have another setup that is also under separation of mixtures, but specifically this is for filtration process. Now the question says the figure is an illustration of a setup used in a school laboratory to separate the components of a suspension. So the setup is used to separate a suspension. The components are actually not stated. So you are looking at a mixture of a suspension. Now it says study carefully the figure and answer the questions that follow. The question A says you should name the parts labeled I up to VIII. BI says you should state one function. Each of the parts labeled V, VII, and VIII. Question BII says you should name 2 materials that could be used for the parts labeled V. Question C says give one example of a suspension whose components can be separated with a setup. And the final question D says state one precaution that should be taken during the performance of the exercise involving the setup. Okay, so we're going to look at the solutions starting from question A. So question 2. Question A. We are labeling the part from I up to VII. So we have I, IV, V, VI, VII, and then we have VIII. Okay. So from the diagram, the I is pointing to beaker. So the beaker that is containing the mixture. So I is beaker. The II is pointing to what is inside the beaker. So that is the suspension. So that's the mixture, or you can say suspension. And then your I, that's the third labeled part, is pointing to the funnel. And then the IV is pointing to what is left inside the funnel after the separation of the suspension. And what is left in the funnel during filtration process is what we call the residue. So that's the residue. And then V is a material that is placed in the funnel to help separate what is left in the funnel and then what drains into the beaker below. So the V there is the filter paper. And then your VI is the liquid from the suspension that drains into the beaker. And what drains into the beaker is what we call the filtrate. The filtrate. Then your VII is the retort stand. We came across that in question 1. So that is the retort stand. And then the last one is the steering rod. Okay, so that is for question A. We finished labeling the parts from I to VII. Now let's quickly look at question BI. BI is asking us to state the functions of the parts labeled V, VII, and then the VIII. Okay, so question B. VI, we are asked to give the function of the part labeled V. And the V there is the filter paper. So the function of the filter paper is to help separate the residue from the filtrate. So it helps to separate insoluble solid particles, that's the residue, so in short, the part labeled V helps to separate the residue from the filtrate. And then the VII, the VII is the retort stand. So attached to the retort stand is the clamp. And both the retort stand and the clamp helps to hold the beaker and then the funnel in position. So it gives support to the beaker containing the filtrate and holds the funnel firmly in position. And then lastly, the part labeled VII. The VII labeled here is the steering rod. Please don't make a mistake by stating that the steering rod is used for steering the suspension on mixture, because from the diagram that is not the rule of the steering rod, because it is not used in steering the mixture. But rather, the steering rod there is to ensure that when the mixture is being poured into the funnel, there is no spillage or splashing. Okay, so that's the function of the steering rod there. So it prevents splashing or spillage the VI prevents splashing or spillage when the suspension is poured into the funnel. So those are the functions of the parts labeled V, VI, and VII. We're going to look at the BII. So question B, II. Question BII. So question BII. It says we should name two materials that can be used for the part labeled V. So apart from the filter paper, you can also use foam. You can also use foam. You can also use a white cloth. A white cloth. So one, I use foam. And then two, white cloth. Okay. Now question C. It says give one example of a suspension. One example of suspension whose components can be separated with a setup. So we are looking at example of suspensions that can be separated using the method of filtration. The method of filtration. C. So you can have a suspension of chalk particles, powdered chalk particles and water, powdered charcoal and water, gari and water. So these are examples of mixtures that can be separated using filtration. So these are some examples of mixtures that can be separated using filtration. Now, in reference to this, supposing the preamble stated that it was a mixture of gari and water that was separated using the setup, then in that case, the residue indicated there would have been gari particles. And then the filtrate would have been labeled as water. So take note of that. So if the suspension is specified, for instance, a suspension of gari and water, then the residue, instead of writing residue, let's say you write gari particles. And then instead of writing filtrate, you write water. Okay, so that's for question C. And lastly, question D, it says, state one precaution that should be taken during the performance of the exercise involving the setup. State one precaution that should be taken during the performance of the exercise involving the setup. Okay, so in this setup, most of the apparatus are glass weights. So you must, the glasswares have to be handled with care to prevent breakage, breakages. And then you have to ensure that the funnel is firmly held in position. And then when you are also transferring or pouring the mixture into the funnel, it has to be gently done to prevent splashing and spillage. So those are some of the precautions that are to be taken during performance of the exercise. So precautions. Okay, so these are some of the precautions. The funnel must be held firmly in position, and then the suspension must be poured carefully and gently into the funnel to prevent spillage. But both the first and second precautions are to prevent spillage and splashing. And then finally, as I said, since most of the apparatus are glasswares, they have to be handled with care to prevent breakages. Okay, so this brings us to the end of question 2.